Live on national TV, Marjorie Taylor Greene slammed her fist down and called Jasmine Crockett unprofessional in front of the entire chamber. Jasmine didn't flinch. She opened her laptop and dropped one email that flipped the room upside down. Cameras froze. Greene went silent. What was in that email? And why is it now being called the moment her career died on live television? The hearing opened under a heavy silence, the kind that pressed against the walls and made every shift of paper sound louder than it should. Reporters clogged the hallway outside, their cameras humming, their voices cut off by the thick doors. Inside, lawmakers sat stiff-backed, their faces blank, as if carved in stone. The air felt brittle, ready to snap at the smallest spark. Every eye turned toward the witness table where Jasmine Crockett sat, waiting for her turn to speak. She leaned into the microphone, her voice sharp, clear, and unwavering. The truth is simple. Our schools are not equal. Minority students are pushed into broken classrooms, stripped of resources, and told to compete as if the race was fair. Her words cut through the quiet, bold, and measured, each one landing like a strike. There was no stutter, no hesitation, only conviction. For a moment, the room was held in her rhythm, the silence now charged with her fire. Then a sudden crack of sound shattered it all. Marjorie Taylor Greene slammed her hand against the desk, the microphone catching the blow and blasting it across the chamber. She leaned forward, her tone dripping with contempt. This chamber doesn't need the speeches of a hot-headed unprofessional. The insult sliced the air clean open, a deliberate wound made for everyone to hear. The effect was immediate. The entire room froze, as if the walls themselves recoiled. Not a breath, not a whisper, not a cough, just stillness. The words echoed through the microphone, hanging in the chamber like smoke. Jasmine's jaw tightened, her fingers curling against the wood of the desk, but she did not speak. For that moment, silence became the loudest sound in Washington. The silence didn't fade. It thickened like the calm before a detonation. A few lawmakers cracked thin, knowing smiles as if the insult had landed exactly where they hoped. Others dropped their eyes, pretending to read notes, dodging the shame that didn't even belong to them. Greene leaned back, slow and deliberate, folding her arms like a queen in a courtroom she thought she ruled. Her chin tilted, her gaze dripping with condescension. Somewhere to the left, a congressman leaned toward his colleague and muttered under his breath, "She's about to explode." But Jasmine didn't explode. She didn't flinch, didn't twitch, didn't blink. Her fingers gripped the armrest tighter, her body still, but her eyes swept the room like a scalpel. She looked at each face, who smirked, who stayed silent, who let the insult pass without a word. She was memorizing them, every coward, every fake ally, every quiet spectator. Then she spoke, not loud, not rushed, just cold enough to cut. If truth makes me loud, then silence is what turned lies into acceptance. No one moved. The room didn't breathe. Her words didn't echo. They carved. The air was thick, hot, like something sacred had just been broken. The camera zoomed in, one frame at a time, capturing the exact second power shifted in the room, not with a shout, but with truth, spoken like a weapon. The silence from Jasmine's last line still clung to the walls, sharp as glass, until Greene leaned back in and shattered it. Her voice rose, not rushed, but full of venom sharpened by performance. "She has no respect for this chamber," she snapped, her tone now louder, more theatrical. "She's loud, emotional, and completely out of control." Greene let each word hang in the air like a verdict, her southern drawl twisting the insult into something almost rehearsed. "This isn't a street corner, it's the United States Congress." Her hand gestured wide, as if presenting a courtroom that Jasmine didn't belong in. This wasn't just about disagreement. Greene was building a public execution, one soundbite at a time. And then she smiled. It wasn't just smug. It was condescending, deliberate, a slow curl of the lip that screamed, "I own this room." Her arms folded again as she settled into her chair like a judge watching the condemned. The camera lights glinted off the silver in her brooch, but all eyes were on her expression. She didn't need to raise her voice anymore. She believed she'd landed the final blow. But Jasmine didn't move. She didn't look away. She didn't lean back or flinch. Instead, she straightened, just slightly, and raised her eyes with terrifying calm. It was the kind of silence that didn't submit. It loaded. Her voice came, not as an explosion, but as a blade. If they call me out of control for speaking the truth, a pause, intentional, controlled, deadly. Maybe it's your silence that made lies feel normal. The words didn't just land. They shifted the room. The impact was immediate but silent. No gas, no whispers. Only the tightening of jaws and the drop of a pen in the corner. Lawmakers froze, not out of fear, but out of awe. They knew exactly what they'd just witnessed. Two ideologies had collided, but only one walked away intact. Jasmine didn't blink. Her eyes stayed locked on Green's as if nothing else in the world existed. Her expression didn't soften, didn't gloat. It didn't have to. The weight of truth doesn't need volume. It needs courage. And Green didn't smile anymore. She sat back, but this time with stiffness in her shoulders, the confidence in her posture beginning to unravel. For all the heat she had poured into the room seconds ago, now she sat in the cold shadow of her own arrogance. The chamber didn't applaud. It didn't need to. The silence said everything. Two worlds had collided, one powered by entitlement, the other by survival. One hiding behind tradition, the other standing naked in truth. For one brief, blistering moment, everyone in that room, on both sides of the aisle, knew they had just crossed a line they couldn't pretend didn't exist. And history had taken note. The silence after Jasmine's last strike hadn't even settled when she moved again. Quietly, precisely, like someone who had already loaded the next round. She didn't speak. She simply turned her head toward the staff table and gave a slight nod. It was so subtle that most in the room would have missed it, if not for what happened next. The lights dimmed just slightly. Then the screen behind her roared to life. The chamber flinched, not at the sound, but at the image. The video was shaky, real, and raw. Green's voice filled the room before her face even appeared. "Back up! Don't touch me!" She was yelling at a Capitol's security officer, finger wagging aggressively in his face. Then it cut to another clip, her shouting over a fellow congresswoman during a testimony, eyes wide with fury, hands slamming the table. Another jump. She stormed out of a budget hearing, tossing a folder onto the floor. Her voice kept returning, louder, nastier, angrier. No music, no narration, just her, unfiltered, unmasked. Then in bold, brutal letters across a black screen came the slide. Unprofessional, a pattern of behavior by Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene from 2021 to 2024. The words hung in the air like a verdict. The room sat frozen, as if the screen had drained the oxygen from the walls. Some lawmakers looked up, others couldn't. The screen kept rolling. More footage, more evidence. A character collapsing in real time. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't turn to the screen. She didn't look at Greene. She already knew what the room was watching. She had prepared for this moment like a surgeon prepares for a cut. And when she spoke, it was not to explain. It was to finish. "Is this the model of professionalism you were referring to?" Her voice was level, low, deadly calm. The kind of tone that doesn't just expose, it convicts. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Because what followed next said it all. A visible ripple moved across the Republican seats. Some shifted in their chairs. One man rubbed his forehead. Another stared at his hands like he'd forgotten how they got there. The guilt wasn't shouted. It was ambient, heavy, unspoken. In the back of the chamber, a few hesitant claps began. Not explosive, just quiet taps, like the first drops of a storm. No one shushed them. No one dared. Even the chairman didn't reach for the gavel. Then came the eruption. Greene stood up so fast her chair screeched backward, drawing every eye back to her. Her face was flushed, jaw locked tight, voice trembling with rage. "That's edited. That's out of context." But no one answered. No one defended. The clips kept playing. Her voice filled the room again, but not from her mouth, from the screen behind her. And now her voice wasn't commanding. It was haunting, echoing, repeating. She was no longer the speaker. She was the evidence. And the chamber, once hers to stir, to mock, to dominate, was now stone quiet, frozen under the weight of who she really was. The last clip faded from the screen, leaving the room in absolute stillness. The lights returned to full brightness, but the weight of what had just been exposed still lingered, thick in the air like smoke after an explosion. Jasmine didn't turn to the screen. She didn't gloat. She waited just long enough for the silence to settle into discomfort. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped forward. It wasn't a dramatic move. It was precise, controlled. Her heel struck once against the floor, clack, and heads turned automatically. No one blinked. No one whispered. Her presence now filled the chamber without her needing to say a word. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, slow, but it didn't hesitate. It hit like a slow-burning flame that knew exactly where it was going. 8 years ago, I was thrown out of a courtroom in Texas for defending a poor black boy who couldn't afford a lawyer. She didn't blink. Her hands stayed at her sides, firm, calm, unmoving. But her eyes burned. Every syllable she said dragged with it the weight of memory, of injustice, of a truth too often buried. They called me emotional, loud, unprofessional. The repetition echoed through the chamber like a trial of its own. She paused just long enough, not for effect, but for precision, then delivered the line that cut through bone. But they didn't write this in the record. That boy was innocent, and I stood with him until the day he walked free. Now she moved her eyes, and only her eyes, locked directly on Green. No anger, no vengeance, just iron certainty. This wasn't a soundbite. This was a reckoning. If that's what unprofessional looks like, then I'll wear it every day like a badge. The line didn't land like a punch. It landed like a verdict. Green's reaction came like a match tossed into dry brush. She stood so fast her chair jolted backward, metal screeching across the floor like a warning bell. Her hand slammed the table with a loud bang, loud enough to rattle the water glasses. Her voice broke into a shout, not from strength, but from panic barely hidden behind rage. "You're twisting everything. This is a cheap performance." The words rang out across the room, but they didn't land the way she hoped. There was no applause, no agreement, no interruption on Jasmine's behalf. Just cameras, dozens of them, catching the exact second the mask cracked. The irony was brutal. In a moment meant to reclaim control, Green had just become everything she had accused Jasmine of being: loud, emotional, unhinged. And this time, no one had to say it. She had just shown it. The chamber didn't need a gavel. The silence said it all. Green wasn't losing control. She had already lost it. Right in front of America. The chamber hadn't recovered from Green's eruption when Jasmine moved. No raised voice, no triumphant smile, just silence. Purposeful, deadly. With calm precision, Jasmine reached for her laptop. Her fingertips tapped the trackpad once, then twice. The screen behind her blinked to life. Not with video, not with testimony, but something far colder. A document, real, traceable, internal, an email. The message was from Green's own office. Uncropped, unedited, unspinnable. The formatting was formal, but the words were surgical. Jasmine didn't read them aloud. She didn't need to. The room read it together, line by brutal line. Interrupt when Crockett speaks. Make her look out of control and unprofessional on camera. Then another line followed. Worse. She's emotional. Use it. Get her to snap. And finally, push her just enough so we can call it unprofessional. It has to look organic. The silence that followed was suffocating, not in shock, in recognition. What had just been a heated debate, a war of words, had now become something else entirely. This was no longer rhetoric. This was intent. This was premeditation. The screen glowed behind Jasmine like a spotlight from the truth itself. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. It wasn't just a gotcha. It was strategy laid bare. It was the unmasking of power abusing performance. And then Jasmine turned. She didn't rush it. She turned her whole body slowly toward Green, locking in like a final pivot in a closing argument. Her voice, when it came, was cold steel wrapped in velvet. So it wasn't my voice you feared. It was the evidence. She let the silence follow that line. She let the weight of it land. And then, this was never about decorum. It was about the silence you wanted to force on the truth. Her tone didn't waver. It didn't climb. But it sliced. Every word controlled like a scalpel in a surgeon's hand. And across the room, Green stood still. Not by choice, but by paralysis. She wasn't defiant. She wasn't smirking. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Her hands, always so animated, were now gripping the edge of the table, white-knuckled. The color in her face had drained. Her eyes blinked once, twice, as if trying to process what had just been done to her, by her own words. There was no shouting this time, no rebuttal, because there was no defense. The screen behind Jasmine remained frozen, the email still glowing, the sentence still there, cold and damning. A perfect mirror exposing everything Green had tried to deny. This was no longer just an argument between two women, it was a reckoning. And Green, once loud, once smug, once untouchable, was now utterly, completely silent. The knockout had landed, and it was surgical, final, undeniable, and the entire country was watching. The silence following the email reveal was more than uncomfortable. It was unbearable. Green didn't speak. She couldn't. Her jaw clenched, but her eyes gave it away. She was unraveling. Her fingers shuffled the papers in front of her, not to organize them, but to do something, anything, to fill the emptiness swallowing her whole. But it was no use. She stood, not with the boldness she once had, not with the swagger that had filled every corner of the chamber just minutes ago. She stood like someone walking off a battlefield, without armor, without victory, without dignity. Her heels clicked once, then again, too fast, too loud. Every camera turned. The flashes came like lightning, rapid and pitiless. But Green didn't face them. She didn't throw one last barb. She didn't defend herself. She just walked, eyes down, shoulders tight, past the witness table, past her party, past the weight of her own tactics collapsing around her. And in that walk, rushed, silent, humiliating, was the sound of power retreating. Then came a voice that stopped the air. It didn't shout. It didn't even rise above the silence. But it cut clean through it. A Republican lawmaker, gray-haired, mid-row, known more for procedural votes than public statements, stood slowly, deliberately. He adjusted his mic. The room didn't expect him to speak. That made his words all the more seismic. This Congress owes Representative Crockett more than silence. The sentence dropped like a stone, sharp, heavy, irrefutable. For a moment, the chamber didn't know what to do with it. That voice hadn't come from the left. It came from the other side. The side that had, until that moment, sat in quiet calculation. But now the silence broke. First, one pair of hands clapped from the center aisle, then another. A beat later, the sound spread like a chain reaction. Hands, tables, seats. The applause wasn't deafening, but it was real, raw, unstaged. And for the first time that day, it wasn't about parties. It was about lines. Lines that had been crossed, lines that had been held, and lines that, in that moment, were being rewritten in real time. Amid the applause, a moderate Republican, his face unreadable, leaned toward the chairman's mic. His voice was measured, but there was fire in the precision. I'd like to propose a language rules amendment, immediate review, regarding veiled personal attacks in open hearings. No one interrupted him. No one objected. Because what had started as a staged ambush had become a turning point, a rupture in the script, a live, irreversible shift in the very rules of power. And Jasmine Crockett, calm, centered, unshaken, was still standing at the eye of it all. But what happened inside that hearing room didn't stay there. It erupted across the country like a seismic blast. The email knockout clip didn't just go viral, it took over. Within minutes of the hearing's close, the footage exploded online. Newsrooms scrambled to cut and watermark it. Twitter threads popped up dissecting every word Jasmine had said. TikTok creators uploaded frame-by-frame breakdowns with captions like, Watch Green's soul leave her body at 042. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. By the end of the day, the clip had been replayed on every major news outlet. CNN aired it at the top of every hour, branding it the moment Congress froze. MSNBC invited legal scholars and civil rights historians to weigh in live. Even conservative-leaning networks couldn't avoid it. Fox News, reluctant at first, ran a 10-second snippet under the banner. Crockett accuses Green of orchestrated attacks, backed by leaked email. No spin could soften it. No commentary could dilute it. The footage stood on its own, damning, direct, and impossible to explain away. In living rooms, coffee shops, and political war rooms across the country, people watched the same thing. Jasmine standing steady, Green unraveling, and the cold truth glowing on the screen behind them. No one could ignore what they had seen. There were no jump cuts, no edits, just a congresswoman calmly detonating a lie with the flick of a laptop. The following morning, Jasmine appeared on national television. No flashy entrance, no scripted applause. She sat across from the anchor on a primetime network show, composed, deliberate, and sharper than ever. The host asked the question everyone had been waiting for. What do you say to those who accuse you of being too emotional, too direct, too unprofessional? Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't shift in her seat. She leaned forward just enough, her voice even, her tone unmistakably grounded. Professionalism isn't about lowering your head, she said, her eyes fixed directly on the lens. Professionalism is about standing firm in truth. There were no cheers in the studio, no dramatic music swell, just silence, the kind that comes when something undeniable has just been said. And across the country, millions of viewers sat still, because in that sentence they didn't just hear a response, they heard a standard being redefined. And while Jasmine's final words still echoed through newsrooms and lecture halls, something strange began happening, not with volume, but with velocity. The moment didn't just go viral, it institutionalized. University inboxes across the country lit up with one name, Jasmine Crockett. It began with a quiet invitation from a law school in New York, requesting her to speak on the intersection of courage and professionalism. But within 72 hours, the trickle became a flood. Stanford, Howard, Yale, Spelman. Even historically conservative campuses reached out, not to challenge her, but to listen. Jasmine didn't tour like a politician. She wasn't there to fundraise or push a party line. She stepped onto stages not as a guest, but as a witness, a living testament that unwavering truth could outlast power games, smear tactics, and even centuries-old decorum. In packed auditoriums, students climbed stairs just to lean against the back walls. Professors canceled classes to bring entire departments into one room. Some places even installed overflow screens just so people outside could hear her speak. What stunned people most wasn't her tone. It was her stillness, her control, her refusal to deliver outrage, even when she had every right to. On one campus, after she played the email clip again for context, a student in the front row muttered "damn" under her breath, and it rippled through the audience like thunder. But Jasmine didn't pause. She let the clip play, let the room hold its own breath, and then simply said, "This isn't new. It's just the first time someone left a paper trail." The reaction wasn't polite applause, it was rupture. Students began standing, one after another, not just clapping, but testifying. A Latina pre-law student choked up as she said, "That was the first time I've seen someone that calm win." A black professor from the political science department took the mic during Q&A and declared, "You didn't just expose her, you exposed the scaffolding we've all had to perform under." But Jasmine wasn't looking for praise. She redirected every question back to the issue. When asked if she planned to run for higher office, she replied, "I'm more concerned with what's being run underneath it. Systems that reward silence and punish clarity." Meanwhile, something else was shifting. Off stage, off campus, and deep inside institutions not built for emotional reckoning. The press picked up on it fast. One day after her second speech at Georgetown, The Atlantic ran a full-page op-ed titled, "What if professionalism was never meant for us?" The New York Times followed with, "Decorated, controlled, silenced." The language of respectability is cracking. It wasn't hyperbole, it was a reckoning. From cable roundtables to legal journals, the question kept surfacing. Faster, sharper, louder. Has the word professionalism been used to suppress dissent? To invalidate emotion? To trap people in performative silence? A Harvard law scholar went viral after saying on air, if Green's behavior was overlooked for years, but Crockett's composure was questioned in real time, then we have to ask, whose tone are we really policing? The question didn't just stay in media cycles. It pierced institutions that had for too long held decorum above justice. And just as Jasmine's story was rising, Green's was unraveling. Behind the scenes, the fallout inside Congress had turned cold and procedural. And that's when the Ethics Committee made its move. The news didn't break with fireworks. It came through a 3-sentence official release published on the House website and confirmed by 3 separate senior aides. It read, the House Committee on Ethics has formally opened an investigation into Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The inquiry pertains to allegations of coordinated disruptions during official proceedings and misuse of congressional staff to interfere with hearings. That was it. No denial. No press release from Green's office. No camera-ready rebuttal, because the evidence wasn't rhetorical. It was printed, digitally time-stamped, publicly archived. The email Jasmine revealed wasn't just damaging, it met every internal threshold for formal scrutiny. And the line "make her look out of control" had crossed more than political lines. It had crossed legal ones. Capitol Hill felt it. Aides stopped whispering about Jasmine and started whispering about damage control. Some GOP members began removing Green's clips from their own media channels. A quiet memo circulated warning staff to avoid language in future emails that could be interpreted as strategic targeting of colleagues. But the damage was already done. Jasmine had detonated something they could no longer bury. And in that moment, while students stood in line for hours just to shake her hand, while scholars rewrote their lectures, while cameras re-aired her calm voice standing against orchestrated chaos, there was no longer any doubt about the power she carried, not just as a politician, but as a mirror, one that no institution could walk past without confronting its own reflection. And Green? She wasn't trending anymore. She was under investigation. And after the waves of headlines, interviews, and investigations, Jasmine returned. Not for drama, not for closure, but for principle. She entered the chamber the same way she had weeks ago. But this time, the atmosphere was different, sharply different. The air wasn't just heavy, it was charged. The seats were filled again, but the posture had shifted. No one leaned back with folded arms. No one rolled their eyes. Even her loudest critics now sat upright, silent, waiting. Cameras lined the sidewalls, already rolling, but no one dared speak over her steps. She walked slowly, methodically, toward the same witness table where she had once been mocked, challenged, interrupted. But today there was no laughter, no whisper. The echo of her heels tapping against the floor was the only sound in the room. A staffer held the door open behind her, then disappeared without a word. Jasmine placed nothing on the desk. No folder, no documents, no laptop. Her presence was the statement. She faced the room, then the dais, then finally the audience behind the railing. She paused, not for effect, but for command. And when she spoke, her voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It was even, strong, deadly clear. If professionalism means knowing your place, she said, each word cutting through the quiet like a blade drawn slow, then I'm proud to be unprofessional for the rest of my life. There was a half-second delay, not because they didn't hear it, but because they felt it. Then the room exploded, not in chaos, but in eruption. Applause thundered like a dam finally breaking. It wasn't polite, it wasn't political, it was visceral. Lawmakers on both sides stood. Some banged their palms on the wood of their desks. A veteran senator known for never clapping during testimony leaned forward and joined in. Even the staffers, who had learned to remain invisible, clapped from the walls. The moment didn't feel staged, it felt earned. And yet, through it all, through the ovation, the pressure, the surge of cameras zooming in, Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't soak in the spotlight. She didn't bow. She didn't let the noise change her rhythm. She just stood there, shoulders level, spine straight, eyes forward. Not triumphant, not emotional, just solid. Like someone who had never needed permission to speak truth, and never would. The applause faded, but the silence that followed was louder than ever. Not the kind of silence built from fear or hesitation, but from realization. The kind that settles in deep when everyone in the room knows they've just witnessed something that cannot be undone. Jasmine didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Her final words had already been carved into the walls of that chamber. But what lingered, what no one could stop thinking about, was not just what she said, it was what it revealed. Because professionalism, this sacred word, this polished shield that had been used for decades to measure worth, had just been cracked wide open. Across the country, people weren't quoting legislation. They weren't citing committee rules. They were quoting her. Not because she was loud, not because she was angry, but because she was right. People didn't see a meltdown. They saw restraint. They didn't see rebellion. They saw refusal. Refusal to shrink, to bend, to be anything smaller than exactly what the truth demanded her to be. And the truth, raw, uncomfortable, uninvited, had finally been allowed to sit at the table. Not because someone in power granted it permission, but because someone like Jasmine pulled back the curtain and forced it in. Truth doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask for approval. It doesn't wait to be scheduled or formatted. It doesn't smooth its edges to fit in bullet points or corporate memos. Truth doesn't wear a tie. It shows up in broken voices, in shaking hands, in the refusal to stay quiet when silence would be easier. Jasmine didn't rewrite the rules. She just asked, who wrote them in the first place? And when no one could answer, she kept going. Because deep down, this was never just about one woman versus another. This was about an entire system that had been built to favor calm over clarity, comfort over confrontation, control over courage. And for too long, professionalism had been a leash, polished, reasonable, elegant, but a leash nonetheless. One that told women, especially women of color, smile but not too wide, speak but not too loud, fight but not so fiercely that it makes others uncomfortable. But Jasmine Crockett broke that leash, not by yelling, not by flipping tables, but by standing so still, so sharp, and so certain that no amount of noise could drown her out. They called her unprofessional. And maybe they were right. If professionalism means erasing your fire to keep the room at peace, if professionalism means watching injustice walk by in a tailored suit while you bite your tongue just to keep your job, if professionalism means shrinking in front of power so power doesn't feel threatened, then yes, she was unprofessional, and thank God for it. Because sometimes what they call unprofessional is actually dignity. It's backbone. It's humanity refusing to be rearranged for the comfort of the room, and that's the lesson no transcript can capture. That's the moment no headline fully translates. It's not just about who won the exchange, it's about what survived it. Because Jasmine's presence didn't just fill the room, it redefined it. She didn't just hold her ground, she became the ground others had to answer to. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that integrity doesn't always show up in polished tones or quiet hands. Sometimes integrity walks in wearing boldness like armor. Sometimes it speaks with fire, because fire is the only thing that cuts through fog. So yes, power was present in that hearing room. It sat behind desks and carried gavels. It wore pins and badges and decades of tradition. But for the first time in a long time, it had to listen. Not because it wanted to, but because it had no choice. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't ask for a seat at the table. She brought her own truth, set it down, and made it undeniable. And that truth burned. It burned through the performance. It burned through the decorum. It burned through every weapon they threw at her. And it stood. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. And so, as the cameras turned off, and the analysts filled their screens with commentary, and the op-eds began to draft themselves, something quieter, stronger, deeper settled across the public conscience. It was this. Truth doesn't need the permission of power, and sometimes what they call unprofessional is actually the highest form of courage we have left. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.